In the dense woods of northern Georgia, on March 8, 2025, twin brothers, 19-year-old Qaadir and Naazir Lewis, set out on what was supposed to be a simple camping trip. It was meant to be a weekend getaway, an opportunity for them to escape the stresses of daily life. Little did anyone know this trip would turn into one of the most shocking and mysterious double homicides the state has ever seen. Bell Mountain, a place known for its breathtaking views and tranquil surroundings, was supposed to be the perfect spot for two young men to unwind. But the peaceful landscape would soon become the scene of an unimaginable tragedy. But when the brothers didn't return home as planned, their family knew something was wrong. By March 8th, their worried parents filed a missing persons report. A search began, and the area was combed for any signs of the young men. Hours later, the discovery came. Qaadir and Naazir were found dead. But this wasn't just an accidental death. It wasn't a case of hikers lost in the woods. This was murder. Atop the mountain, investigators found the brothers' lifeless bodies. Both were shot, and no signs of struggle were apparent. The situation seemed to suggest a possible murder-suicide, a chilling theory that immediately began circulating among the authorities. But the family refused to accept that explanation. The Lewis family, shocked and devastated by the loss, began to question everything. "There's no way," they said, "that one brother could have taken the life of the other. We need answers." Then, in a twist that would set social media ablaze, new evidence surfaced. A surveillance video from a local gas station. The footage, captured just hours before their deaths, showed the twins together, laughing, chatting with strangers, and acting completely normal. They looked happy. They looked fine. There was no sign of distress, no sign of tension, no sign that their lives would soon be cut short in such a brutal way. The emergence of this video sent shockwaves across the public. What had happened? In those few hours between the footage and their tragic deaths, how could two young men who were seen alive and well end up dead on top of Bell Mountain, just hours later? And if it wasn't a murder-suicide, then who was responsible for their deaths? As the case continues to unfold, investigators are digging deeper. Yet they still seem to be hitting dead ends. Was it a random attack? Or was there someone who knew the brothers personally? Someone who wanted to silence them forever? The only certainty is that the mystery remains unsolved. And with every passing day, the pressure on law enforcement mounts. What really happened on Bell Mountain that day? Why were Qaadir and Naazir killed? And more importantly, who did it? In the days following the discovery of the twins' bodies, law enforcement launched a full investigation into their deaths. The area surrounding Bell Mountain was combed for any additional evidence that could help explain the murders. What we found at the scene was baffling. No personal items were stolen, no signs of a robbery or forced entry. The brothers were dressed for camping, with their gear and belongings intact. There was no indication of a struggle. It appeared to be an execution-style killing. Investigators considered every possible theory, from a targeted attack by a stranger to something far more sinister involving someone the twins knew. But every lead seemed to come up empty. Meanwhile, the case exploded across social media. The hashtag #ChuckJusticeForQaadir and Naazir trended as more and more people shared the surveillance footage. The public was captivated by the mystery. Everyone wanted to know who could be responsible for such a brutal crime. Was this a case of jealousy, a grudge gone too far, or something else entirely? The Lewis family's heartache grew stronger with every new development. They couldn't understand why this had happened to their sons, and they made it clear no theory was going to go unchallenged. They wouldn't rest until the truth came out. For the small community in northern Georgia, this was more than just another crime. Qaadir and Naazir were well-known, well-liked, and well-respected. Their deaths weren't just a tragedy for their family. They were a blow to everyone who had known them. After weeks of investigation, several leads emerged. Local residents who had been in the area at the time of the brothers' deaths reported strange behavior from a group of men spotted near the mountain. Were they connected to the case? Did they know the twins? Crime experts weighed in on the case, offering various theories about what could have happened. Some suggested it was an execution-style hit, while others believed it could be linked to something much darker, a personal vendetta. But with no clear motive, no suspects, and no witnesses, the case continued to spiral into a cold mystery. Hours later, search teams discovered their bodies. Found atop Bell Mountain, near the spot where they had pitched their tent, were the lifeless bodies of Qaadir and Naazir. Both brothers had been shot, and their deaths were not just tragic. They were suspicious. The authorities quickly arrived on the scene. What they found was puzzling. The twins were dressed for a camping trip, with all their gear and supplies in place. Their backpacks, tents, and camping equipment were untouched. There were no signs of a struggle. No visible injuries other than the gunshot wounds. At first, investigators entertained a theory. Could it have been a murder-suicide? Could one brother have turned on the other in a fit of rage, killing him, before turning the gun on himself? The theory sounded plausible, but there were glaring inconsistencies. The twins had no history of violent behavior. They had never been involved in criminal activity. What was the real story behind this? For a brief period, law enforcement believed they had cracked the case wide open. The murder-suicide theory seemed to fit the evidence. But as investigators dug deeper into the twins' lives, the theory began to unravel. Friends and family members quickly rejected the idea. There's no way this was a murder-suicide, they said. Qaadir and Naazir were known for their close bond. They were inseparable. The idea of one killing the other felt impossible to accept. The more the family pressed for answers, the more law enforcement started to question their initial theory. How could two young men, both with bright futures ahead, suddenly find themselves in such a tragic situation? Was there more to this case than met the eye? Something didn't sit right with the investigation. Every detail seemed to raise more questions than answers, and the murder-suicide theory, once thought to be the simplest explanation, was now in jeopardy. As the investigation stalled, the Lewis family refused to back down. They made it clear, no matter what, they would not rest until they knew the truth. They started a social media campaign, pushing for a thorough investigation and demanding justice for their sons. But the public attention was about to grow even more intense. In late April 2025, a new piece of evidence surfaced. Surveillance. Footage from a local gas station, filmed just hours before the brothers were found dead. The footage showed the twins walking into a gas station, laughing, joking, and looking completely at ease. There were no signs of tension between them, no indication that something was wrong. They appeared to be in good spirits, just two brothers, enjoying a normal day before heading up to Bell Mountain. This new footage set social media ablaze. People couldn't understand how the twins, so full of life just hours before their deaths, could have met such a tragic and violent end. The gas station footage raised even more questions. What had happened between their stop at the gas station and the moment their bodies were found? How could two seemingly happy young men have met their end so suddenly and violently? Theories started to pour in. Some speculated that the brothers may have been targeted by someone they knew, a person with a motive to harm them. Others believed that the case was far from random. It had the hallmarks of something more calculated, more deliberate. As the case continued to gain traction online, the family found themselves at the forefront of a viral movement. The hashtag Justice for Qaadir and Naazir took over social media. People from all over the country demanded answers, some even offering their own theories. The family was overwhelmed by the amount of support they received online. They couldn't believe how many people cared about their sons' deaths, and how many were pushing for the truth to come out. But the pressure that came from the public was intense. With so many people watching, the authorities felt the weight of the case. They couldn't afford to make mistakes. Every new lead, every new clue was scrutinized, not just by the police, but by thousands of eyes online. The investigation into the crime scene continued as detectives pieced together the timeline. They scoured Bell Mountain for additional evidence, fingerprints, footprints, any sign of another person who may have been involved. What they found, however, only deepened the mystery. There were no signs of another person, no prints, no footprints, nothing to suggest that someone else had been involved, just the twins and the gunshots. The crime scene was peculiar. We found no signs of a struggle, which initially made us think it could have been a targeted hit. But again, there were too many unknowns. Was it an execution? Was there a personal connection to the twins? That's what we're still trying to figure out. As authorities continued their investigation into the mountain, They began to gather testimonies from other hikers and people who had been near Bell Mountain on the same day. Some reported hearing strange sounds, while others claimed to have seen figures lurking in the distance. Were these just rumors, or did they hold the key to uncovering the truth? With no clear leads in the case, detectives turned their attention to the locals. They began to question anyone who might have been in the area at the time of the brothers' deaths. Were there any suspicious individuals spotted near the mountain that day? A few individuals came forward, claiming to have seen a group of men near the mountain, but none of them could provide concrete details. Was this a case of mistaken identity, or was there someone out there who knew exactly what happened? A local resident who had been hiking on Bell Mountain that day reported seeing a dark figure near the brothers' campsite, but was unsure of any details. The mystery continued to grow. Who was this figure, and why had they been there? At this point, we were still piecing everything together. One thing we knew for sure was that this wasn't a random crime. Someone had planned this. The question was, who? Crime experts and criminologists offered several theories about the case. Some believed that the twins may have been involved in something they didn't realize would turn dangerous. Others suggested that the case could be linked to something much darker, a personal vendetta. But as more time passed without a solid lead, the experts began to look for patterns. Was this a case of mistaken identity? Or could there be a deeper, more personal connection between the twins and the person who killed them? The fact that two young men, twins no less, were found in such an isolated area with no signs of a struggle suggests that the killer, or killers, had planned the crime. But it's not clear yet if this was a targeted attack or if they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Could it have been a case of revenge? A betrayal between close friends? Or even an unresolved issue? From the past, there were more questions than answers, and the theories continued to pile up. As the investigation continued, the public became more obsessed with finding the identity of the killer. Theories about who could have committed the crime ranged, from a jealous ex-lover to a complete stranger with no connection to the twins. Could the twins have been targeted by someone they knew? Or was this an opportunistic attack carried out by a stranger with no previous connection to them? Was the killer someone from their past? A former acquaintance with a personal grudge? Or was it a stranger, a random act of violence that occurred for reasons we may never fully understand? Or could it have been a more calculated attack by someone who had been stalking the brothers? Someone who knew them, knew their movements, and knew exactly how to catch them off guard? The fact that the twins were killed in such a deliberate and clean manner leads us to believe this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was premeditated, and someone out there knew exactly how to carry it out. As new evidence surfaced and the investigation grew colder, one final piece of evidence emerged that could hold the key to solving the mystery. Was it enough to finally close the case? The final clue came from a local store clerk who reported seeing a suspicious vehicle parked near Bell Mountain on the day of the twins' deaths. The clerk couldn't identify the driver, but the sighting would prove to be an important lead. Detectives dug into the vehicle's history and discovered that it belonged to a man who had been in the area before, but had no clear connection to the brothers. Still, the connection between the vehicle and the crime scene was enough to keep the investigation alive. As the investigation progressed, the pressure on law enforcement intensified. The media, the family, and the public demanded answers. The Lewis family, still grieving their sons' deaths, refused to back down. They would not rest until they got justice for Qaadir and Naazir. Despite their heartache, the family pushed forward, organizing protests, raising awareness, and demanding that the police exhaust every lead. With public outcry growing louder, the pressure on law enforcement was undeniable. Every new clue brought new hope, but also more questions. But with no clear suspect, no arrests, and the killer still at large, the question remained: who was responsible for taking two innocent lives? And why? As the case continued to gain traction online, the family found themselves at the forefront of a viral movement. The hashtag Justice for Qaadir and Naazir took over social media. People from all over the country demanded answers, some even offering their own theories. The family was overwhelmed by the amount of support they received online. They couldn't believe how many people cared about their sons' deaths, and how many were pushing for the truth to come out. But the pressure that came from the public was intense. With so many people watching, the authorities felt the weight of the case. They couldn't afford to make mistakes. Every new lead, every new clue was scrutinized, not just by the police, but by thousands of eyes online. As we conclude the story of Qaadir and Naazir Lewis, one thing remains painfully clear. The truth behind their deaths is still out there, just beyond the reach of justice. The investigation may continue, and new developments may unfold, but, for now, the mystery remains unsolved. The case of the Bell Mountain twins serves as a reminder of how fragile life can be. Two young men, full of promise, taken far too soon. Their families, their friends, and the entire community are left with unanswered questions, and the search for justice continues. The question remains, who killed Qaadir and Naazir Lewis, and why? Please subscribe and like for more content.